In-game ownership is obviously not real, but if you understand anything about ownership, you know that it changes your relationship to how the game works completely. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 games that let you own things. Now we're going to start off at number 10 with Satisfactory. Trying to leave most traditional building games off this list because kind of obvious, but this one goes a little bit beyond. So Satisfactory is a standout, and it might look a little bit like Factorio in 3D, but so let's talk about the bird's eye view that a lot of other city builders and factory games use, whereas Satisfactory, you're a guy. You walk around and build things in first person. It's very different feeling. Yeah, I guess in SimCity you are technically building a city, but you don't really get to experience it like a person. Satisfactory does that. So you can build something totally incredible. You'll get these sprawling automated super factories covered in tracks, conveyor belts, all these machines constantly running all at once, and it's crazy, and you made it. It's yours. You can walk around and see it like a person sees it. And no, this is fully a product of your individual creative work, and that's badass. It's not an easy game to jump into by any means. The mechanics can be pretty complicated, but the feeling of ownership is strong in this one. Moving on to number 9, it's Starfield, because of course Starfield, right? I know it's the new hotness right now, but come on, just the shipbuilder alone should earn this game a spot on this list. The shipbuilder is a marvel. It may be one of the most impressive single things in Starfield, at least to me. Sure, there's a ton of planets, but who really cares? You can build your own ship, and it looks awesome. Now, if it was really basic, there wouldn't be a lot to talk about here, but there's really a real learning curve to ship construction. It's complex. The menu it's a little fiddly. It's a Bethesda game. I never said it wasn't a Bethesda game. Can I get through mentioning any of their games without mentioning the mechanical substrate on which they run? I'm gonna try. It was hard to get through that sentence alone without saying it, but it's a Bethesda game. It's fiddly, but that doesn't mean it's not worth taking the time to learn it. People have made some amazing ships and some extremely dumb ones, and that's part of the fun. Your ship isn't just a tool from getting point A to point B. It's your home. Don't you want to go back to your home? Insert Happy Gilmore clip here. But seriously, in terms of what Starfield is, it's the sturdy thing. You build it. You live in it. It's yours. There's a certain satisfaction you get just from having it. And that's not even talking about all the other stuff you can own in this game. You can own homes in the main cities. You can build outposts basically anywhere that's not settled. The outpost system isn't quite as fleshed out as a shipbuilder, but it's a lot of fun. And if you got the resources, do. It doesn't limit you to just one outpost either. You can build a ton of things and create an entire network of bases. You can easily dump hundreds of hours into this part of the game by itself. And number 8 is Tears of the Kingdom, okay? Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild lets you own a home, but it is nothing compared to what you can build in Tears of the Kingdom to live in. Yeah, I'm talking specifically about your Tears of the Kingdom house. It's not as complex as anything you're going to build in Starfield. I'll say that right off. But it makes up for it by being extremely satisfying. You get the option to buy a patch just outside of Terrytown, and from there you can buy pieces of a house and put them together like Lego blocks. And what makes it so fun is that it's all done using Ultra Hand. You're combining everything the same way you would build anything else. It's just that in this case, they're room parts that you stick together. The game, it can be a little picky about how you build your house. Everything has to connect properly, so you can't just make your own version of the Winchester Mystery House, unfortunately. But the feeling of ownership, it's real. The way you manually slot together each portion of the house is beyond satisfying. I don't know how else to put it. It's a pretty simple system that's not expansive as it could be because of the limitations of the Switch hardware, but it's still super fun to mess around in. And the house you ultimately make is great for displaying all the unique weapons you find, but never use because you don't want to break them. And number 7 is Mad Max, probably an unusual one because the feeling of ownership doesn't come from a house or a factory or a fully customizable ship, but from a car. Oh, we've sung the praises of Mad Max many a time on this channel, but this is one of the ways that it really does shine. In this game, the entire story revolves around building up this car called the Magnum Opus. Seriously, Max just wants to leave to the point where it's made him pretty mad, so he needs to build a powerful engine to do it. In most open world games, your car just feels like a thing you're using to get around. They're disposable or easily replaced, but that's not the case in this game. In this game, if you crash your car, you gotta get out and fix it. You only ever get access to this one vehicle, and so much of the gameplay revolves entirely around it. It's got a winch, you can use a sniper rifle from the back seat, it's a mobile inventory, it's everything. It's an extension of your own character in a way few video game vehicles are. It's also highly customizable with tons of different upgrades and chassis, etc. It's so cool. Depending on the player, it can look and drive totally different, but it's still the same fundamental thing. It's one of the few games where they do a really good job making you feel protective over your car, or just like a thing that you have, because ultimately it's what matters in the game. You get a certain sense of pride from upgrading it, you can't lose it, you don't want it to get messed up, and that isn't to say Mad Max is the perfect open world game or anything. We're all gonna rally around the idea that it's an underrated game that deserves maybe more praise and maybe just attention than it's ever gotten, and everything that has to do with the car is absolutely excellent.
The crew, pumped from the very ground, inside a concourse to be refined in gasoline and gas town.
And number 6 is Metal Gear Solid 5. Peace Walker was the first game to introduce base management to the Metal Gear Solid formula, but MGS5, it really made you feel like Mother Base was your base. You're not just a lone operative anymore. You're the head of an entire mercenary organization. You can recruit soldiers. It's maybe a little silly because you strap enemy soldiers onto balloons, and that apparently makes them want to be part of the team, and after a little stay in the brig. But there's multiple platforms you can assign staff to, which are responsible for developing weapons and equipment for you. That's all well and good, but the thing that really makes a difference is you can actually land and walk around the place, and it's massive. This entire offshore platform is just yours, and everybody on it answers to you.
Welcome back. Thank you, boss.
It's something you never really have to interact with. You're free to just focus on missions and manage your base while out in the field, but taking a trip back to base and just wandering around, it can be really satisfying. Like most things in MGS5, there was a lot more planned for this part of the game, but knowing that this isn't the full extent of it is actually really impressive because, I mean, it goes way further than a lot of other full games based around this. I mean, that's not to say the management elements are beyond fleshed out or anything. I'm just talking about the base itself. The base is bigger than Shadow Moses Island from Metal Gear Solid 1. It might be bigger than Big Shell from Metal Gear Solid 2. I don't know. In any other game, this place would just be the bad guy's stronghold. Maybe you are the bad guy in this game. I don't know. It's subjective, but yeah, maybe that's what this is. It's badass either way. And number 5 is Dragon Quest Builders 2. There's plenty of RPGs that give the player a place to call home or a home base that starts off in disrepair. You gotta build it, blah, blah, blah. But rarely do these games actually make you do all the repairs yourself. Most of the time, when you got that element of the game, you set up base and call it home, and all these characters that you accumulate, they all hang around and do the work for you while you're out stomping baddies. This is not the case with Dragon Quest Builders 2, which combines a JRPG with Minecraft, and somehow it actually works really well. A big part of the game is traveling to various towns and building them back up, but it never feels like ownership in those scenarios because you're really just helping out a community rather than building something for yourself. The place you actually do that is the Island of Awakening, a place you return to periodically through the story. This place starts out as a bog. It's miserable. The first thing the game wants you to do is make a river, a meadow, and a forest because those things aren't there. And it's not like you just click a button and a river appears. You got to dig a trench and get water flowing through it. That's what a river is in this case. It's one step of many too, and it just starts off as a totally uninhabited uninhabitable place. But after dozens of hours and a lot of landscaping and building, it can become a massive city because of you. There's a real sense of satisfaction at the end of the game. You can look down on this island and see how much it's evolved. It's fun to own a city in a game, but it's better when you build it with your bare hands. Rather than like, click this plot, and there shall be a building there. I don't know why that involves a transatlantic accent. Oh, you say you want to build a city, eh? But I don't know. It's not like that in Dragon. You build it with your own hands. At number 4 is Subnautica. What makes Subnautica stand out from other base building survival games is just how utterly essential your base actually is. In most of these games, the environment's hostile, but you won't literally die if you're in it for too long like Subnautica. The threat of drowning is pretty constant. Even when you get further in the game, you're able to equip an air tank with a bigger supply. The fear of running out of oxygen is just omnipresent. That means your base, and by extension your vehicles, are absolutely essential. The more you need something, the more it really feels like it belongs to you, and you care about its well-being. At least that's how I feel about it, and Subnautica probably does it better than any other survival game out there. When you finally do manage to build the Cyclops submarine, it feels like a huge achievement, and you better believe that you're careful with that thing. It's your lifeline when you're deep underwater, so losing it would basically be a death sentence. So take care of it. Keep it in good condition. This is essential stuff. Being inside a vehicle or in your base feels like you can finally breathe in this game. They're some of the only places where you're not constantly on the clock. And number 3 is Pathfinder Kingmaker, the hardcore computer RPG based on what else? The Pathfinder RPG system doesn't just give you a house or even a town to build up. In this game, you'll settle for nothing less than an entire kingdom to call your own. It is an entire city-building kingdom management game built on top of an already robust role-playing game. It's like if Baldur's Gate also had Europa Universalis attached, and that's only slightly less complex than I'm making it sound. If anything, a lot of players find this a little too complex, but I'm all for it. The game lets you make all these large-scale decisions and decrees about the state of the kingdom, but you can also get into the nitty-gritty and assign construction, annex new regions, and carefully manage the stability of your kingdom. It's a daunting system, but it's an ultimately satisfying one. As a king, you basically own everything. There is actually a reason we moved beyond that system in real life. Not everybody can be a king, right? Real fun game to play, though. The feeling of ownership is just like crazy. And yeah, you can automate a lot of the decisions. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to make the best decisions in your stay, but you can delegate. It's up to you. It's a little more abstract than the rest of the games on this list, but the feeling of ownership is really there when you return to your central city, and it's grown and evolved because of your efforts.
I wouldn't expect anything else.
And number 2 is Ni no Kuni 2 Revenant Kingdom. This JRPG curiosity does something similar to Pathfinder, but is entirely different in execution. Like with that game, you found your own kingdom, in this case literally building it up from scratch in an empty field to become an entire city and country. The actual kingdom management mechanics are pretty simple. You're spending most of your time looking for new citizens to recruit and constructing new buildings and getting resources, constructing upgrades, blah blah blah, but it's a really satisfying system. The kingdom itself, extremely charming and a fun place to be around and see what you can upgrade it to and improve it. Every citizen is a character in their own right, which gives the place more of a sense of community than cities you can build in a lot of other games, and the whole experience is just extremely charming. It's not the most feature-rich bit of ownership in games, but that's not always what gives the feeling of ownership. And finally, at number 1, it's Stardew Valley. This is the game that really reignited the entire farming genre, and for good reason. It is an excellent evolution of the Harvest Moon formula. That is to say, it's a game where you inherit a decrepit, out-of-use farm and fix it up while making friends with the local townsfolk and eventually working hard enough to make money. It's one of those games where ownership is built into the DNA of the game, and you could say it's a farming simulator, but I wouldn't equate it to the same thing as like a Sim City. I illustrated this a little bit in a different point, but it's really that you're so hands-on. It's less realistic here than like with Satisfactory, but you're doing it in the world. You're not some omnipresent god who's just pointing at a thing and suddenly a crop appears. You are cultivating a farm. And yes, it's probably a little easier to do than a real farm. Between all of the planting and nurturing aspects and the other things you have to do in this game, what eventually results, the product of your labor, is really due to your efforts, and you just feel good about it. The entire game is basically just about slowly improving your property, getting access to better tools and more land. And that sounds kind of mindless, but it's really, really satisfying when it's all said and done. You start off with a beat-up, rock-filled crap hole, and eventually work up to a huge manor with a bunch of farmland. Might sound like small potatoes compared to a lot of the other games, but there's something about Stardew that makes people connect with it more than probably most other games out there. The feelings of ownership and satisfaction are just off the charts here. It's too bad that with video games, you don't really own them. You own a license to play them. The owners are really the corporate overlords. Those jerks. They get to make completely unaccountable decisions about how things are going on, like that whole Unity thing. Wow at that. Imagine if you owned Unity. You could, not do that. I'm not going to end on such a low note, though. I'm going to give you a bonus point instead. And you'll understand why they're both bonuses as soon as I mention them, but I have to mention them. Fallout 4 being the first. I already talked about Starfield, which has Outpost that functions pretty similar to Fallout 4, that system. But there's something about this game that just makes the ownership of these settlements feel more important. I think it's the settlement system, where you build up towns with defense and assign settlers to them, making what started off as a simple hut into a sprawling survivor camp. In this game, you can't just assign people to a camp and walk away. You gotta generate food and water and keep them alive and happy. You're not gonna make anything beautiful, but you can do some pretty impressive stuff with it. The other, it's Red Dead Redemption 2. Your horse feels like a part of you in Red Dead 2, even more so than the first game. But the thing I'm here to talk about, it's near the end of the game. For most of the story, the only thing you really get to own is the clothes on your back and a few random belongings back in the camp. It's not until the epilogue does the character manage to improve their life, like tangibly. If you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. There's a mission where you build a house at Beecher's Hope, and it's great. And yes, it's entirely a story sequence. You're not actually building anything. It just happens. But for a game with no real way to own much of anything, this sequence gives you this pride of ownership that contrasts with everything else in the game. When it's all over, you actually get to walk around your house, and it's the same one from the end of the very first Red Dead game, and it's great. Really, the entire mission is great. It's just so wholesome and unironic, just genuine. It's nice to see sincerity in the world, honestly. It's a happy little mission where John and his buddies build a house. Nothing bad happens. No dark twists to ruin the mood. Just a positive little thing in an otherwise dark game. You don't exactly own it the way you're directly responsible for the other things on this list, but I think it counts. And again, this is a bonus point. And also, Red Dead 1 is technically, chronologically after this, and it's not nice what happens in Red Dead 1. So I guess I actually didn't do a good job of not ending on a low note. Owning stuff is cool! Is that yeah, you know what? Let's end on that. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero. We'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.